Oh, good. It finally went live. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but live was contemplating going live. Let me just hit that we're live on Twitter. Good evening. It is September 20th. Thank you for joining. Tonight's town hall, for those of you who are new, I usually start out with a topic that I've thought about a little bit this week. And then if you have questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the chat, just like you would at a regular in-person town hall. So in person, a lot of town halls, what usually happens is there's a speaker, and then either a microphone is passed around or questions get written on note cards. So this is sort of like the getting written on note cards version. And so you just put it in the chat. And what I'll do is, depending on how relevant the question is to the topic, I may finish the topic and then move to the chat, or I might pause where I am and inject it in. So this week, I wanted to talk a little bit about, just a little bit about what makes sense for government services. I was contacted by someone up in Escort Station, which is way up, the northernmost Maine resident that we have. And his postal service stopped back in 2020, and he doesn't have postal service. None. Gone. Completely not available. And his choices are to drive through Canada, which was problematic in COVID, or to drive not through Canada, but over logging roads and quite a few miles. Either one would have taken hours out of each day to go fetch mail that was, again, previously delivered there. So one of the things that I think our government doesn't think about that much, and perhaps they should, perhaps we need more people in government that consider this, is what does it look like to deliver services? Who do we deliver those services to? How do we deliver them? And are there times when we give up? And I think for the Postal Service, we don't give up. That's how we send pretty much all necessary documents. Postal deliveries are done by seaplane, by horseback, by a wide range of mechanisms. It's not just what you see in suburban America. We deliver in all sorts of interesting ways and have over the centuries. So it's one of the very few services that is played out in our Constitution. It's literally spelled out. We need to deliver mail, or that we need to establish postal service. And it's something that is really what keeps our rural communities going. It's a lifeline. So even though there's only one resident right now in Escort, it's still a resident. And it asks the real question that gets asked all the time in rural communities. If you've only got 5 or 10 people or 50 people or 20 people, why should we bother with you? And that's not the point of the government. The point of the government is to make sure that our citizens are served. So I regularly talk about focusing on return on investment. And then I always say it needs to have a human rights backstop. This is that human rights backstop. I've had a few more people join. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, please drop them in the chat, and I will get to them as we're going through. So postal services are one of those services. I think we need to start looking at lots of things as those services. So infrastructure, we need to have a good return on investment with infrastructure. We need to be prudent with our infrastructure planning, but we also need to make sure that we're serving citizens and going that last mile. And that means in a lot of areas, for example, rural areas might need help with landlines or broadband or cellular service that isn't currently commercially provided in a practical way. That's something that we ask our government to take care of. And it's something that I think Congress has really lost sight of. The gentleman who contacted me about his mail not working, he'd already tried to reach out. He tried to reach out to Jared Golden and got nowhere. And I don't have a whole lot of power. We're very fortunate that we have local media that pays attention, and so they picked up the story. I don't know if it'll get resolved or not, but I hope it does, because again, I think that's a service we should provide. So we should be looking at infrastructure, not just our postal services. We should be looking at literal physical infrastructure, so roads, bridges, making sure that people have mechanisms to function. And it's not just in Maine we see this. Puerto Rico was hit by some catastrophic rains this week, and their infrastructure isn't up to snuff. So they've had some loss of life. They've had some massive damage. It is so much easier to do infrastructure in advance of a catastrophe than it is to let the catastrophe take out crumbling infrastructure and have to do all of it. You can just do bits of it and you can shore it up. So we're not really paying attention and planning ahead well with our infrastructure, our physical infrastructure, but it's also emotional infrastructure too. I mean, we need, there was something that just came out today. I saw an article in the AP, and I haven't made it all the way through all the details of it, but there's the short version is that there's a recommendation that we start screening adults for mental health issues as a part of, annual checkups, and particularly anxiety and depression as it relates to the pandemic, but just generally, we need to be screening people a little bit more thoroughly for mental health services, and then making sure we have the infrastructure available to deliver both physical and mental health services. Same thing with dental. And those are sort of softer infrastructure, but that is societal infrastructure. So infrastructure is way bigger than just whether or not your road has potholes. Infrastructure is, does your world work? Does the government make sure that we have the tools that we need to be successful? And there's some things where the answer will be maybe they don't have the tools for us to be successful. Maybe that's too much of a reach. Maybe those are personal items. That might come in the form of, you could consider a vehicle part of your personal infrastructure. And does that mean that the government's going to provide cars to everyone? No, that would be ridiculous to do that. But does that mean that we work on public transit and expanding that infrastructure so that having a car really is a personal choice? Yeah, I think that we should be working on that form of infrastructure too. So I got a comment from Susan. She said, human infrastructure so needed and so neglected. That it's true. I mean, we just haven't looked at our society as sort of a holistic piece that all needs to come together. I was speaking with Bangor Daily News today. They interview candidates to kind of get a profile on them. And that's definitely one of the things that we talked about. I also recorded a podcast. One of the things we talked about is that all of these pieces really fit together, and we keep looking at them like they are standalone pieces. And though there are certainly some pieces that should be fixed with a short bill because it's a problem spot or a pain point, and we can have a reasonably short bill to address a topic. So one of the things that I've pointed out lately is I think that we need a constitutional amendment that protects our right to vote. That could be a 1 to 2 sentence bill. It wouldn't be anything big at all, but it would protect a huge amount of rights to have that. Sometimes those protections and those changes that need to be made are small and succinct and don't need a whole bunch of back and forth. Sometimes they're larger. We need to build a better healthcare system and a comprehensive mental health care system as a part of that, to make sure that our infrastructure and our system works. Our human ecosystem for all of American society and the world generally, but in America, our system doesn't work well together. It's out of sync. It's muddy. It's intertwined in ways that are unhealthy. And when you start to pick at one piece, you end up unraveling a bunch. So another topic that had come up, for example, when I was talking to BDN, we talked a little bit about mental health, and I mentioned, hey, it's great to take care of people's mental health, but now you've got to fix what we've got for a healthcare system. If you want to have healthcare providers for mental health in rural areas, you need to make sure that you've taken care of affordability. Some of that's federal, some of that's local, most of that is local. You need to make sure that they have the infrastructure they need to survive. So, are there schools for their children if they have children? Are there grocery stores? Are there pieces that they need to be able to make sure they have a life there? Are they paid enough that they can live affordably? You have to deal with the student loan crisis, and is education to be able to get the training to do that job affordable in the first place? And if it is affordable, do the student loans, are they predatory lending, and how do we disentangle that? So when we look at these pieces, they are all very much together, and our infrastructure as a bundle is not working right now. That's one of the things we really need to send folks to Congress who are willing to do. We need people who will talk not in sound bites, but really put their thinking cap on and focus on going through different pieces of the infrastructure, seeing how all those threads are tied together and where you can start picking at it to come together and have a better, more comprehensive, more functional infrastructure. And some of these things are going to be short horizons. So let's take student loans, because that is a part of the support network we have. If we were to take the interest rate on student loans to zero, decapitalize the interest, get rid of all the interest that's been accrued, capitalized and paid, give credits for interest that's been paid for loans that are still outstanding, and make sure that interest rate is set at zero. That fixes part of the predatory loan problem. So that's a short-term fix. That's something that could be done in 6 months or fewer that would provide immediate relief, or as immediate as Congress does for relief. And we would still have the problem of our education system generally needs to be repaired, and it needs to be reconfigured in a way that works with modern technology and budgets, and also is affordable for students. We've disinvested in our university systems in the past 15 to 20 years. And so we've passed a lot more of the costs that used to be borne by society onto students, and that doesn't work out very well. But that is not a 6-month problem. That's probably closer to a 2 to 10-year problem, depending on which pieces you're fixing. So right now, we don't really have a Congress that looks at problems and says, all right, this is this kind of a project, this is this kind of a project, we're going to sort these by time frame and how they're related to each other, and we'll pick off pieces, get some of the short-term bleed taken care of, and let's get some of the longer-term projects. We'll start gathering data, and we'll start doing what we need to take care of to make sure that those problems are taken care of. We have not been doing that, and our Congress has not been doing that well. In fact, our Congress is now so focused on short-term, short-range goals planning, and their elections that happen every 2 years for the House, every 6 for the Senate, but I'm specifically running for the House, that they really don't focus on any of the long-term issues at all. They don't have the ability to. They spend the entire time campaigning. And this is one of the things you'll hear me talk about when I'm discussing, hey, we need to look for people who are willing to be, we've got the career politician thing where we think career politicians are awful. If we think of the politicking part as a career, yes, that's awful. But if we think of them as legislative professionals, and hey, I want people that show up on time, prepared, engage in continuing education, make sure they're keeping their skills where they need to be, and really working with folks to make sure that they're working like their retirement depends on it. They're working like they want to, at the end of their career, be able to look back and say, look, I accomplished creating this body of work. It genuinely and legitimately helped people, and it moved our society to a place that was more supportive, more helpful, and created a better, healthier version of us. How terrific. That's the kind of professionals that we need to be pulling in and looking at for these jobs, and that's just not the people applying for the jobs right now. So forgive me if you hear a little background noise. It is a rainy day today, and the children decided that they would like to have the dog run up and down the stairs chasing a ball. So there's a French door that is closed, but there's still a little noise coming through. I hope it's not picking up too bad. That's because you care about people and not donors. Yeah, I don't give a fiddlehead about donors. Don't donate anything to me. I mean, if you want to, cool, I'll put it to good use. But really, I'd rather you take the money and put it in the community. Until we have a government that really works, we have this big problem of having all these unmet community needs. We have all of these services that aren't provided. And without some infusion and some resources there, they are not going to get addressed. They aren't going to get addressed until we have some resources going in directly, and then we have leadership that wants to take care of them. And because everything has been made so team red or team blue, not team, holy crap, let's take care of people, we don't have a system that's working right now. One of the things that came out of the conversation I had with BDN today is, and we've had a few more people come in. If you have questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the chat. I will get to them on regular breaks. But one of the things that came out of the conversation with BDN today is we talked about, they asked, what's a moderate? Do you define that? And I look at moderate more as process than necessarily policy. I look at it as you take the amount of time and the amount of resources you have to solve a problem, add a little bit of buffer, because as we've all learned from my Build a House project, nothing ever goes quite according to plan. Put a little buffer in there, figure out based on what resources you have, knowing there's trade-offs. If you have more man hours, you usually need less money. If you have fewer man hours, you need more money. If your time frame shrinks, sometimes your project's not doable. Let's hope we don't hit that on climate change. But if your time frame shrinks, you're going to need more manpower and or more money to throw at that as far as resources. And you build models that actually help solve problems. Right now, we don't have people solving problems in DC for the most part. We have people yelling about their team and saying, oh, go healthcare, or healthcare's awful, let's get rid of it. But none of them actually want to work together to get a solution. And it is maddening to me as a voter. I'm sure it's frustrating to you as well. I want to see these problems get solutions. And I'm fairly flexible as to what the path is. I'd like it to be the most efficient, most helpful path. Sometimes that's not politically viable. And I describe myself as sort of a mix between a realist and idealist. I know where I want things to go, but realistically, I know they can't always get there when I'd like them to, or the path that I'd like. Sometimes my path is going to be the right path. Sometimes it needs to compromise, either because a not as good path is the one I can sell people on, or maybe somebody has a better idea than mine and we can get there on that journey a little bit faster. So I hope that we start looking at the services that we provide in a much more comprehensive way. I hope that we start looking at our infrastructure as not just, do we have Wi-Fi, which is important? Do we have a high-speed data in all areas? Absolutely. We need to be able to get those services the last mile, even if it's super inconvenient, even if it costs the taxpayers a lot to make sure that somebody in the middle of nowhere has, high-speed internet and has telephone service and has postal service. That's how we keep our rural communities connected and part of this whole system. That's how we keep it so they all work together. And I think that when we do that, we'll start seeing some of these walls come down, like the city folk and the rural folks. And, in Maine, we've got both city and rural, and we also have summer people and not summer people. You can always tell when it's people season here. But I think a lot of those walls do come down when you start looking at it through a problem solver lens, not a you don't understand us lens. The only way we get that understanding going is by starting to suss through these problems and make sure that we're coming up with solutions. So whether it's me, whether it's another district, whether it's another race, whether it's one of the gentlemen in this race who may or may not join me at debates, start demanding from your candidates that they really, even if they don't have the exact solution, and I think it's fair to not say, oh, you don't have, every single solution. I don't have every solution. And I don't even have access to, for example, CBO scoring, so that's budget office scoring, to tell me if some idea is going to be a good idea. I mean, we don't have it so rando people can walk up to Congressional Budget Office and say, score this, tell me if it's a good idea. That would be an immense waste of resources. So, a lot of times people ask me if I have a solution, and I usually have a lot of ideas. I don't know if they're good solutions yet. That's an okay answer to say, here are, some types of ideas that I'd like to work on. Here's some solutions I think might work, but I'm flexible. I'll work with others. What you don't want to see is people who only have complaints and don't ever try to come up with solutions. And even if they don't have solutions, because sometimes you can't, sometimes that is not realistic, they don't have a mechanism or a framework to work with others to come up with those solutions. They just want to whine a lot. And just whining a lot doesn't get anything done. For the job that Congress does, it's not a particularly well-paid job, but it pays too much for somebody who's that lazy. Let me know if you have any other questions, comments, concerns. We've had a couple of people more come in. I usually make sure I talk for at least 20 minutes or so. We are at about 19. I have all the time in the world for you. If you have questions for me, I am happy to answer them. I never want you to feel like I'm dashing out. However, I definitely recognize that not every night folks have questions. It's kind of a gloomy, rainy night where I am. We have variable weather. One of the jokes that we tell in our house is if you don't like the weather, just drive 20 minutes or 20 miles. You'll be to some different weather a lot of the time. So for these, I do try to talk for about 20 minutes. I try to talk about, I generally pick a topic. So this week, that topic was, how are we making sure that we have services and kind of how those services integrate to folks. And I also have a Saturday, we call it Breakfast with Tiffany. That comes on at 8 o'clock on Saturdays. It goes on most Saturdays. Every once in a while, I have an event that makes it so I can't do that particular town hall. So, for example, there may be a hunter breakfast coming up where I just would be literally driving and I can't do a town hall while that's going on. These are every Tuesday, absent conflict. There is scheduled to be a debate next Tuesday, but it's filming in the afternoon, so I should probably still be able to do the town hall. I'm not sure exactly what time the debate is broadcasting, or if it is, or if the gentlemen are showing up. The TV stations are still working that bit out, and I find it to be very entertaining to watch the posturing of the gentlemen, where they're trying to figure out how to debate me as few times as possible and never one-on-one, but not getting credit for ding-dong ditching those debates. So that's been really interesting to watch play out for the last few weeks. We did just have some more folks join, so we'll talk for another minute or two. If you have questions, I have all the time in the world for you. If you have questions that take more than a minute or two to answer, happy to answer them. If you'd like to participate in the campaign, lots of ways to do that. You can find me online on Twitter, just following, it's free. Retweeting or asking questions, interacting, telling people that they might want to follow my account, all free, takes a few minutes. 5 minutes a week volunteering can make a huge difference. If you want to throw a little money at something, boy, the boys are getting wiggly, so I hope that is not too loud. Give me just one moment. I can hear you. You want to take it upstairs, please? Thank you. Sorry, they were getting very excited. And the dog is super exciting. I want to be chasing tennis balls up and down the stairs with the dog, too. They look like they're having a lot of fun. So other ways to get involved, if you like to throw money at things. If you want to throw not very much money at things, I'm asking folks if they want to help write out postcards. So you provide the postcards, you provide the postage. I provide addresses and a script, and you write them out, pop them in the mail. You do as few as 5 or 10 of those. You can do up to 100 of those, whatever works for you. It's just a few minutes of time. Great way to help the campaign. Fairly low commitment, great for introverts, as long as you've got legible penmanship. We also have a bunch of Maine raisings going. We're going to be switching Maine raising. Right now we're doing teachers. We're going to be switching that to helping out with food banks and heating oil funds. Even though I'm very committed to the environment and making sure we're diligent with our environmental choices, that doesn't change the short-term problem that we have people in Maine that are going to have to pick between being cold and hungry this year, and that's not okay. No matter what people's personal failings are, I think that we are a wealthy enough country that people should never have to pick between being cold and hungry. So we're going to be helping out on that. We're also going to be buying sweet treats for Halloween and showing off all the great things around the state. So for those of you not familiar with Maine raising, instead of giving me money, I don't need it. Go ahead and invest in the community. Spend money shopping at small businesses, donate to not-for-profits, and leave a note that says that I asked you to invest in the community instead of give me money. There are some folks that have given me money. I think that I've used it wisely, but it's been less than $5,000 so far. I would much rather have those investments go into the community. That's where the money belongs. Whenever a politician says, I think that we should be investing in our community, make them show you. And that's what I try to do with each part of my campaign. I haven't seen any more questions or comments since Susan's. So I will see you on Tuesday. You can always find me online. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My direct messages are open on Twitter. You can reach me on Instagram if that's your preference. I also have a website. You can send me an email if you have a lengthier question or expect a lengthier response. I get through them as quickly as I can. I have a few stacked up right now. There's a lot of commitments on my time with the debates and a lot of interviews and a lot of recordings the next 2 weeks because we're getting close to ballots being received in the mail. So the next couple of weeks are going to be pretty touchy. If I don't get back to you immediately, take a breath. I will get to you as soon as I can. And I look forward to seeing you Saturday morning. I hope you have a cozy evening, and we will talk soon.